boy. Now, we're going to talk about that there is some controversy with C.S. Lewis. And if you know anything about the controversy of H.P. Lovecraft, you probably know what's coming. The controversy of H.P. Lovecraft was that he was a byproduct of his time. He had mental problems. He had issues with his mom. It wasn't all his fault. Even his Jewish wife that he married that loved him, cared about him, and she apparently valued him without denying that he had a problem. But it feels that whatever controversial, extremely outdated racist views that H.P. Lovecraft had were less of his choice and more a byproduct of his mental illness, his fear of everything, and of who he was, where he was at. He was raised in like these people that saw themselves as the semi-nobility of England, and if you're raised around people who have those beliefs, chances are those beliefs rub off on you. There's so many people who can explain that in depth. I personally think Weaponized Nerd Rage did a good video on it. Like, I didn't know that he was going to give me a documentary. I thought he was going to just rave a bit against cancel culture, but he actually is like, whoa, Weaponized Nerd Rage. This is actually a very thoughtful essay that would go great in college. Nice job. I did not expect one of the better documentaries on the man H.P. Lovecraft, especially one that made me feel for him without necessarily condoning his bad line of thought. Now, the thing is that Tolkien was a product of his time. He was in Britain whenever it was an empire. And so, probably because of where he grew up in the circles that tend to be religious and therefore tend to be more conservative, he probably can't help but have a little bit of that thought of a benevolent imperialist. By today's standards, it's bad, although some of the people who condemn that line of thought because it was done the old-fashioned way don't realize how they tolerate it, in their blind spot. The thing is that one thing that people might have held against Lewis in the same way they held against Lovecraft or even Tolkien is that some of the baddies in his book are based on Middle Easterners and seem to be based on stereotypical portrayals of Muslims, even though technically the Calormenes are pagan. They're polytheist. They're not true Muslims, although they're probably more based off of Muslim warlike societies, and it's The Horse and His Boy probably is based on the Crusades. There is a little bit of difference. Now, and it showed that some Calormenes were good, it showed that some were respectable, but a lot of people, particularly on the left and particularly on the internet, they like to get real bitchy every time somebody who is from an older time, who is conservative and Christian and a bit traditionalist and imperialist, which, not all of those things were even good back then, but back then it was kind of harder to know better. And the thing is that it's sort of one of those things that, like, if they wrote it now, I could see how it was problematic, but I feel that back in his time, C.S. Lewis was trying to at least be fair-minded and say, well, some of them are good. We just don't like the government and the purveying culture, and they are kind of at odds with us. We feel like they're being led astray by bad leadership, but some of them are, really cool. But some people on the internet who have criticized C.S. Lewis have said, you're still not racist even if you admit that some of them are good. Well, I mean, that's technically true, but I kind of feel like you're singling our homeboy C.S. Lewis out here, that, like, you're really giving him hell because he made a fantasy equivalent to Middle Easterners that aren't even technically Muslim, even though they're pretty much a stand-in for Muslims. They're not technically Muslim. They are from the desert, but he gives some credit to them. And they technically worship a different religion. It's polytheistic. So maybe they have more in common with the pre-Islamic Persians. I don't know. But the thing is that they're really mad because in one of his stories, the bad guys were that race of dark-skinned, desert-dwelling people. Now, I understand if you just read one book and that was the only thing that you read, that you would think that this guy had a hard-on for Muslims and Arabs. And probably most people in his line of thought did by today's standards. But at the same time, he also had the Telmarines and Prince Caspian that were villains. The Telmarines in the book, they came from pirates, And the Telmarines represent, well, the Catholic Church in a way. Prince Caspian was about the Protestant Reformation. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Winter Revolution, as it's called in the books, is about Jesus Christ dying to save man from their sins. The people, the bad monsters under the White Queen, Empress Jadis, the White Witch, Queen Jadis, Empress Jadis. Jadis represents Satan. She doesn't represent Jews or Druids. You know, we're going to get into some Spaceballs territory, or debatably some Final Fantasy VII territory by fusing Jews and Druids together. But the thing is that she represents the devil, and those people who are killing Aslan represent, you know, bad angels, evil spirits. They're not meant to represent Jews. They're not saying that this is not the Passion of the Christ made to make you hate Jews. Okay? And a lot of liberals like to criticize right-wingers of being anti-Semitic, and historically a lot of anti-Semitic organizations have been on the right wing. But, you know, liberals, you know, even if I agree with some of your criticisms of Israel, sometimes you guys can kind of cross that line too. And, you know, and I mean, I do believe in that there are bad Zionists, and I do even believe in the synagogue of Satan. I believe that there are bad people in high positions of power who say they're Jewish, but they're more along the lines of what we stereotype Satanism to mean. A better word would be Luciferian globalist, or, you know, dark wizard Illuminati, but they pretend to be Jewish. So I actually agree with some of the things the left says about criticizing the government of Israel, but the left really likes to pin everything on white Christians, and it's like, look, white Christians may have done a lot of bad, liberals, but you are your father's child, and if you don't watch out, because I want you to be better, because I'm trying to help you out, you're actually going to commit the same sins that your conservative Christian racist Southern granddaddy did, but in your own way. And it's not because you're bad or that you should hate yourself, but it's because you become what you hate. And you need to be realistically acknowledge that you do hate people. Liberals, some of you do hate people. You can be bigots. I forgive you, but learn from it. So that if you're so disgusted by what your white ancestors did, make sure you don't do the same thing disguised as progress. I say that with some tough love. Now, with that being said, I'm kind of pointing this out, how the left like to, some people on the left who were critics of C.S. Lewis, was that they thought that he was being, you know, Islamophobic or anti-Semitic. And by the way, a Semite is any Middle Easterner. Even though nowadays it just means anybody who hates Jews, well, Jews that are mostly white, although sometimes the Israeli government likes to say that you're anti-Semitic just for disagreeing with something that a lot of Jews disagree with too. I digress. The thing is that basically they thought that, you know, he had a hard-on against any Middle Easterner, but Prince Caspian should disprove that, because guess what? C.S. Lewis was a Catholic, as was J.R.R. Tolkien. So whenever he is saying that his home team, the Catholic Church, had some problems, to the point to where he sympathized with Protestant rebels resisting the Catholic Church, represented by the Telmarines. In the movies, they look like conquistadors, but I think in the book, they were more based off of the Holy Roman Empire, because their symbol, I don't know if it's the same in the book or whether it was in the movie or not, but the symbol, you know, a two-headed eagle might have represented the Holy Roman Empire, and of course, everybody who plays Warhammer 40k gets a hard-on when they see that. But the thing is that, look, if I'm Catholic, I'm not Catholic, but if I'm Catholic, but if I thought that the Catholic Church in the medieval times was messed up, to the point where I say, you know that little rebellion they had against us? Yeah, we weren't exactly in the right, were we? Maybe it's kind of good that we learn from our mistakes and realize we were bad back then, and that's why we basically had a chunk that left us. You know, live and learn. That takes a lot of open-mindedness on his part, instead of just being blindly pro-Catholic Church. He's admitting that people who were his historical, socio-religious, and political enemies had a point. So he's criticizing what was wrong with him. It'd be like if I'm American and if I'm pro-America, but I actually understood from certain points of view why some of the Native Americans resisted us. That even though I'm all American and I love America, I understand that from the Native American point of view, them fighting against us would have felt justified. And I'm not happy with everything my side did, by far. Or if I was up north, if I was a Yankee, basically, and if I realized that even though maybe it's better that we won the war, the South was getting screwed in its own way. There's more to this conflict than just slave owners. Of course, they had a lot of sway because they were rich, so it was about slavery for them. But some of the reasons why people in the South wanted to fight back wasn't because they were all jerking off to slavery. It was because, oh shit, the North is invading us. Or, oh shit, the North has been kind of screwing us with taxes. It's taxes, I swear to God, taxes are always involved in any conflict. Or likewise, if I'm from the South, and I'm like, I'm proud of being Southern, I'm not embarrassed of being Southern, and I still sympathize with the Confederacy, but yeah, maybe it's better for the country that the North won. Maybe it's better for the country that we lost. That takes some open-mindedness. People. I mean, that takes a lot of open-mindedness, especially, it's like whenever I saw this person who was a Wiccan or into New Age, and she was talking about why in the Old Testament in the Bible did they say to kill witches? And this person was Wiccan. She was, into the New Age stuff, but she was even understanding. Like, she was showing mercy to people who were her historical enemies and saying that even if they were wrong, they had a point. She was very respectful. Why would the Bible say all that bad stuff about witches, when a lot of witches are nice and good? And it's because they were going from the age of Taurus to the age of Aries, but they were trying to have to baptized themselves from the social ills of Egypt, a prosperous but ultimately corrupt and decaying empire, so they had to kind of reset, and they had to be strict about everything. They had to put themselves on a diet to the occult, because the occult had invaded their lives and corrupted them, so it was all bad, even if it's possible that there's a good witch or a bad witch, not from my point of view, but from a Wiccan point of view. God bless this New Age Wiccan pagan, whoever she is. God bless her for being such a sweetheart, and actually being able to say something nice about the Bible for that time. She was being so sweet, and it wasn't that she was catering to the right wing. She wasn't catering to Christianity, but she was being fair. She wasn't being one of those people that was antagonistic, that was like, no, it wasn't right or ideal, but I get why it happened. They weren't trying to be that way just to be bad. And you shouldn't be that way now, but I understand why it was that way back then. It had a reason, one that we don't consider, and that didn't make it even all completely right from my point of view back then, but there was a reason to it. So that was very open-minded and mature. And I have to say that maybe we can use some of that on people who want to judge things that are definitely outdated now. And it probably wasn't very good back then, but how could it have crept up on it? Most people are only as good as the world allows them to be. People who make real progress often have to sacrifice so much to rise above and make that change that becomes mainstream. And now everybody's doing the right thing because it's easy. Whenever doing the right thing's not easy or popular, very few people do it. But I'm probably going to make a part 2 on this. I'm going to also talk about in a minute about how, we're starting on this and we're talking about why Narnia will have a hard time being translated. One of the things that I said is that because it kind of grows up with you, it goes through different stages. So it's almost like each book has is better for a slightly different aged audience with different interests. So that might be why it couldn't be consistent. But another thing is that in the next video, I'm going to continue finishing the thought about how another reason why it's problematic is not from a racial or religious point of view concerning Muslims, but on how feminists could take a little quote at the end of the book the wrong way. And then, whether I finish it all up in one video or not, I'm going to talk about what the solution is, how it could be brought back into the mainstream consciousness, and how it could translate into other forms of media, and what form of media and what group of people doing it would do it enough justice.